10. Eating mummies. Did you know that Europeans used to be cannibals? That's right. Europeans actually ate human flesh up until the 17th century. That wasn't even that long ago if you think about it. In fact, Europeans used human flesh in all kinds of different medicines, thinking it could heal them. Where did they get all this human flesh? They stole it from Egyptian mummies. This was more widespread than makes sense. Priests, scientists, and the royalty of the day all believed that eating human flesh would allow them to gain the strength of the deceased. Grave robbing became a huge business at home, while mummies were shipped in from Egypt to be ground into powder. This powder was often mixed with either chocolate or alcohol, then consumed to cure all kinds of different sicknesses, from headaches to internal bleeding. But Europeans did more than just eat mummies and nibble on dead people to improve their health. They also painted with the dead. According to science history, painters in the 1800s used supplies pillaged from corpses. Specifically, the artist Martin Drolling used pigment from a mummy, brown pigment, in 1815 to produce his famous painting, Interior of a Kitchen. Mummy pigment then became popular among the local painters, who used it all the way until 1915. 9. Vampire children. Imagine if the whole world found out that there were vampire children running around and drinking people's blood. It would obviously be horrifying. And yet, according to archaeologists, they themselves were horrified and shocked when they discovered the remains of a young child only 10 years old at the time of death, who they say was buried ritualistically to prevent her from rising from the dead and feasting on the living like a zombie vampire. This crazy discovery came from Italy in 2018, with a team of researchers from the University of Arizona and Stanford University working together to uncover the bizarre vampire burial. There have been other vampire burials discovered throughout Europe, but this is the first one in which a child was found entombed with a giant rock stuffed inside of their mouth. The stone was jammed in the mouth on purpose to stop the child from rising once buried. It's highly unlikely that the child was actually a vampire. In truth, she was probably a victim of a malaria outbreak from the year 400, a crippling disease that killed a lot of small children and babies. However, because of the ravages of the disease, the locals probably thought she was a vampire and buried her as one. Then again, maybe there are vampires still hiding in Europe and nobody wants us to know about them. 8. Ritual human sacrifice. A new study has revealed a very disturbing piece of forbidden history. As it turns out, ritual human sacrifices actually played a pretty critical role in ancient times. It helped those who lived at the top of the social ladder in society to keep their power and exercise control over those beneath them. The study was done by researchers with the University of Auckland's School of Psychology, as well as several other organizations. They wanted to reveal just how unequal ancient hierarchical cultures were, especially those that used human sacrifice to keep their power. Here's the part of the study that shows just how brutal the evolution of modern society has been. While religion is often seen as the motivator of morality and social cooperation, this new study has found that religious rituals actually had a much more sinister role to play and may not have been for the benefit of the people. The study looked at 93 cultures, 40 of which practiced ritualistic human killings. What they found is that the victims were almost always of a low social status, and the method of human sacrifice was almost always brutal and cruel. The reason for the killings was even crazier. It was usually the leader of the tribe who decreed there be a ritual sacrifice for some kind of important event, like the inauguration of the leader's new house. This weird dynamic of killing the less fortunate to celebrate extreme wealth shaped society into an unequal game, and that's not something they're teaching in history class. 7. The dark side of Valentine's Day. Valentine's Day is one of the most celebrated holidays in the world, but it's also one with a dark and forbidden history. Forget about the chocolates, roses, and expensive jewelry. The history of Valentine's Day is horrifying. It's also quite gruesome. I'm talking about decapitation, jail time, illegal weddings, and even a little bit of sacrifice. First, it's important to understand who Saint Valentine was. He was a Roman priest who performed secret weddings for couples who were otherwise not allowed to get married. This happened after the Emperor Claudius made a decree that single men were better at being soldiers and shouldn't be married. Saint Valentine defied this law. but his defiant weddings would go on only for so long until the emperor found out, at which point Saint Valentine was sentenced to die and be beheaded. But wait, because this is only one of the legends that surround Saint Valentine. Another says that he was arrested and killed for helping Christians to escape from the Roman jails, and he did it after falling in love with a prison guard's daughter. Before he had his head cut off, Saint Valentine allegedly wrote her a letter signed, "From your Valentine." Will you ever see Valentine's Day the same way again? Let us know in the comments below. And if you're liking this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe buttons if you haven't already. 6. Gasoline baths. Here's a little-known piece of dark history for you. At the United States border, in 1917 to be exact, the American health officials in the West Texas town of El Paso decided it was a good idea to use toxic chemicals to disinfect arriving immigrants. Those who were seeking refuge in the United States, traveling across the border from Mexico, were given gasoline baths. They were literally hosed down with gasoline or kerosene to be disinfected. It was a horrendous practice, and when a 17-year-old maid from Juarez, who had already been crossing the border daily for her job, was subjected to the treatment, she refused and caused a riot that actually shut the entire border down. There was really no scientific evidence that spraying people with gasoline did anything beneficial for anyone, except maybe for entertaining the border guards. But the riot didn't stop the practice, and neither did the public outcry. Gasoline baths actually went on for decades and would inspire Nazi scientists to create their own chemical baths, which they used to kill millions of persecuted Jews. It wasn't until the 1960s that kerosene baths stopped being used at the border, nearly 20 years after Germany stopped fumigating Jewish people with Zyklon B in the showers. 5. The alien coin. A set of ancient Egyptian coins may be the proof everyone has been waiting for that aliens really did land on our planet thousands of years ago. One particular coin of note was allegedly found during a house renovation in Egypt. It shows a spaceship hovering over the ground, and no one is sure where it came from. Conspiracy theorists claim that the coin is evidence that aliens had more to do with ancient Egypt than most people realize. Then there is the coin with what appears to be an extraterrestrial being on it, a creature with huge black eyes, a bulbous head, and possibly a Roman toga. It looks like an alien senator from Rome, although obviously there is no mention of such a thing in the history books, and how the coin would have come to be in Egypt is a complete mystery. What's truly amazing is that nobody knows where these coins came from. Nobody has bothered to date the coins to see when they were mined, and no other coins like them have ever been found. Some are saying it's a great big cover-up and that the government doesn't want you to know about it. Others say that it's only a matter of time before whoever made these coins, probably thousands of years ago, comes back to see what happened to their favorite pyramids. 4. The Rendal Forest UFO sighting. Speaking of visitors from another planet, back in December of 1980, US airmen claimed that they witnessed a UFO flying through the Rendal Forest in England. It was December 26th, and several United States Air Force security people stationed in the United Kingdom witnessed lights beaming in the forest around their base. However, the sighting was swiftly dismissed as nonsense after it became public knowledge, and the encounter made headlines all throughout the United Kingdom. According to those who witnessed the UFOs, they were red and orange with blue lights blinking on and off, as well as beams shooting out of them. And these were soldiers, not just everyday crazies mistaking bats for monsters and stars for aliens. One of the eyewitnesses was the very credible Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt. But the story only lasted a handful of days before it was buried, and the reasons why the sighting was so easy for those in power to dismiss may strike you as either completely rational or obviously crazy. It was said at the time that the soldiers didn't actually see a UFO, and instead saw the beam from the nearby lighthouse on Orford Ness, though to be honest, you would think trained soldiers would know the difference between a sweeping lighthouse light and the beam from an alien spaceship. It's also true that at the time of the sighting, the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind was in theater, and so the soldiers were accused of having overactive imaginations. 3. The Singapore Stone. The Singapore Stone is a bizarre fragment of rock which once stood at the mouth of the Singapore River. The enormous rock weighs about 180 pounds and dates back as early as the 10th century. But here's the forbidden part in the stone's history. It has an inscription written on it in a mysterious language that nobody has been able to decipher, not even today with modern technology. Some of the recent theories suggest the inscription could have been written in Old Javanese or Sanskrit, though that could just be scientists grasping at straws. It could also be that the writing was left on the rock by an unknown civilization or race of people that we don't even know about. It's a mystery that might never be solved. And to make things more suspicious, in 1843, the stone was blasted out of the place where it had stood for 1,000 years to widen the mouth of the river so that the locals could build a fortress. Today, the mysterious stone is housed at the National Museum of Singapore. Nonetheless, nobody can figure out what it says or who wrote the curious characters all over the surface of the rock. What do you think it says? 2. Biblical giants. A recent archaeological dig has apparently shown for the first time that giants really did once walk the earth. The archaeologists found over 20 skeletons that once belonged to huge people at the ruins of Rujim el-Hiri in Golan Heights, Israel. According to the archaeologists working with the University of Tel Aviv, the giant skeletons could be even older than the ruins in which they were found. Mainstream archaeologists have dated the ruins as at least 5,000 years old, meaning if true, these giants may be even older. That would mean that giants were walking around before Stonehenge or even the pyramids were built. And here's where things get a little strange. The ruins are massive and ancient, and have been a place of biblical interest for a long time because of the areas mentioned in the Bible. Apparently, this was the place where Moses killed Og and his army of Rephaim, which in Hebrew means giants. The newly discovered bones may not only be proof that giants existed, but also proof that what was written in the Bible actually happened. 1. The Strange Medallion. Akhenaten was a pharaoh who lived in the 18th dynasty of Egypt. He was also the father of the famous boy king Tutankhamun. However, not much is known about Akhenaten because he was despised by the Egyptians, and after his death, they tried to erase all mention of him from history. But he's arguably the weirdest pharaoh of them all, and it starts with his appearance. It's not that he was ugly or misshapen. Instead, he kind of looked like an alien. He was portrayed as having almond eyes, a very small abdomen, weirdly thin limbs, and a skull much larger than any normal human. And get this, the reason he was so hated was that he proclaimed the Egyptians will stop worshipping their pantheon of gods and instead worship a single god. This was a serious act of heresy and the main reason that when Tutankhamun became pharaoh, his father was written out of the history books. Akhenaten claimed that all the gods up until that point were all false and that the Egyptians should from now on only worship the sun. And yeah, that kind of seems like something an alien would say. Even the pharaoh's genes were all wrong. Assistant Professor of Comparative Genomics at Cairo University, Stuart Fleischman, recently published the results of a study that took him 7 years, in which he mapped the genome of 9 Egyptian pharaohs. 8 of the genomes were normal, but the DNA of Akhenaten was all wrong. It was unusual. Particularly, the DNA evidence showed that he had an unusual growth of his cerebral cortex, meaning that he had greater cranial capacity. In other words, he had a mutation which caused his brain to grow far larger than normal. Based on his looks, his DNA, and his weird behavior as a pharaoh, some believe that he was actually an alien and human hybrid. Though what his mission was on Earth, well, nobody can say. Thanks for watching. How do you feel about these dark and forbidden secrets? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button and come back again for another awesome video. See you next time. Bye!